You're listening to the Green Machine podcast, your Irish football news and nostalgia, where you, the fans, get to have your say. Nick hosting alongside Martin as we digest Thursday's FAI media briefing, where Stephen Kenny's future was discussed, as was Vera Pauw's past, as well as the ongoing issue around sponsorship for the men's national team. Martin, a unusual week, wasn't it? I mean, a media briefing that we knew was coming, some things that we didn't expect, and some things that were fairly well broadcasted, well in advance, that we could kind of predict in a way. But Stephen Kenny's job is safe, at least for another couple of months. The Vera Pauw situation was clarified somewhat, still plenty of question marks, and still no national team sponsor. What are your first thoughts on it, Martin?
Yeah, I mean, like this was the administration side of the FAI coming to the fore here, and after the disappointment of Paris and Dublin, obviously against Holland, there was speculation that it's all going to be that it was all hastily arranged. It's going to be Thursday, and Stephen Kenny's going to be getting the door. Basically, lots of rumours going around on that. I mean, for the first few days in the wake of the Holland result, we were putting up polls, and kind of everyone was kind of fed up with Irish men's football and Stephen Kenny, and saying, "Oh, Lee Carsey's going to get approached now, and this is what they need to do." And then basically the rug was kind of taken under our fans' feet in a sense, because it was just very clear that this media briefing was planned completely by the FAI. We love a review in Ireland. We do reviews of everything, and it's much speculation that Jonathan Hill had not made himself available to the media in Australia, and after Vera Pauw's departure, we were waiting to hear the fallout from that and give the FAI's perspective, and we got that to some extent, and it was quite refreshing in a way. But I think a lot of fans on social media were kind of prompting the press pack to ask certain questions, and I think, to be fair, I haven't read and watched most of it, and read kind of the analysis of it. They did go into a lot of the details on it, and I found it quite interesting overall. I mean, it's just drama, isn't it? It's still, a very mixed kind of view on so many important things to Irish fans.
And an unusual setup as well, Martin. I mean, the thing that kind of got me was the fact that they were covering so many things at once. I mean, the Vera Pauw thing should have been addressed weeks ago, and Jonathan Hill should have been available to do that. The Stephen Kenny thing should have been addressed on Monday, regardless of whether he was staying or not. The sponsorship thing, look, we knew where that was going anyway. We know that they're struggling. We know that they're very open that they're struggling. It was unusual. I found it amateur. I found it really, really amateur. Even the layout of the whole thing, I found it absolutely ridiculous. I think we're going to start off, Martin, chatting about Stephen Kenny's situation at the moment, and the fact that he will be kept on for the remainder of the campaign. Now, you did call this. As did I, actually.
Yeah.
Who didn't call it, though? Who said, he'll definitely be gone. He'll definitely be gone.
Dave was thinking they would put the bullet, I think.
Yeah, our beloved anchor, who we can slag off tonight. He was at Vogue World, isn't it?
Yeah,
Vogue World. Yeah,
everywhere.
Yeah, he doesn't love you. He doesn't love our lovely listeners. But yeah, I mean, look, I said this off air to both of you. We WhatsApp group, obviously, that we don't use that often, and and I kind of expressed my frustration, Martin, didn't I? I explained the other day, we did our window review, and I described the flatness that I'm feeling at the moment around the Irish team that I've never felt before. In my 25 years, I'm going to say, maybe 25 years plus supporting the Irish team, I've always had a strange obsession with them. I've always had an unusual love of the Irish team. I've always admired them. I think I explained it to you there last week, Martin. I think the older you get, the less you view them as your heroes, because they're older than you. Or sorry, then they're younger than you. They're not like old enough to be your father, or to be your big brother or whatever. But I've never felt this flatness when we score, when we concede. You get a sense of emotion with the teams you really love, the teams you really support. That married with the fact that it's your country, it's a collective love. It just hasn't captured my imagination for a long, long time now. And even when we struggle, Martin, I feel hurt, where now I'm feeling nothing. And Stephen Kenny, we've met him. I know we keep throwing that in, but we have met him. We've had the privilege of meeting him, and he's a very impressive guy, a very nice guy, a very personable guy. But even that, Martin, it can never be enough. I mean, we're 3 years into this now. We're 3 years into this. We've seen positives. We've seen a lot of young players blooded. I fully believe that they would have been blooded by whoever came in,
Mm.
given their progressions at club level. We have seen a change in the style of play. I don't think it's anything revolutionary. I think professional footballers under any manager that encourages a passing style of play can get lads passing around the back three. But having said that, they are positives nonetheless. It is progression in a way, but it's the inconsistencies, it's the plethora of losses, it's the underperformance against very, very weak opposition, friendlies or not. It's the flat tone of the manager. It's the ramblings of the manager as I'm rambling right now. It's so many. You can hear it in my voice even now, Martin. I am tired. I'm flat. I wouldn't say disinterested because I do want to discuss it, but I knew after about 5 minutes of that press conference when they were going to discuss Vera Pauw first, I knew Stephen Kenny's job was safe, and you never like to see anyone losing their job. I I think the exception sometimes has to be taken in football. They're on outrageous money. Outrageous money. Even Stephen Kenny, he's not on as much as a Premier League manager, but still a huge amount of money. But when you haven't come up with the goods, and as Ireland manager, Martin, we discussed this on Sunday. We discussed this in our post-match review or our post-window review. Your brief as Ireland manager isn't necessarily beating France. It isn't necessarily beating the Netherlands, albeit a weak Netherlands side, one of the weakest I've ever seen in my lifetime anyway. But it is about trying to get us to an international tournament by hook or by crook. It's about maximising limited players. That's always been the brief, Martin. And Stephen Kenny has failed very quickly in two campaigns, out of the running straight away. His narrative for the last couple of years has been, we're aiming for Germany 2024. Mathematically, we're not gone. We have a 12% chance of qualifying via the playoffs. And if we get to that playoffs, I do not for a second believe Stephen Kenny deserves rather to lead us into that. We have Mick McCarthy secure a playoff for us in the last European Championship qualifying campaign. He was let go before he had the opportunity to get to a playoff. He lost one game in that group, a weak group, but one where we had a worse team than we do now. I think that's up for discussion, but I do think it was a worse team than we do now. An aging team, a limited team, certainly not as talented as the one we have now, I believe. And he was let go early. Stephen Kenny was given extra time at the start, and now he's getting extra time at the end. As I said, Martin, I'm losing the motivation to even talk about it. It's frustrating. It's
You're
nothing.
doing well enough.
Yeah. Like it's nothing personal on Stephen Kenny, but as an Ireland fan, as someone who shouldn't feel ashamed or shouldn't feel embarrassed or shouldn't feel wrong about demanding more from my team, wanting more from my team. Yes, we are limited, but why can't I dream, Martin? Why can't fans dream? It's a flat situation. We both called it. We knew when the FAI or when those reports came out about the FAI saying he needed 2 points in those games. We knew, didn't we? We knew that Stephen Kenny would get this campaign. I'm disillusioned now, Martin. To be brutally honest, and it's
which I'm
nothing
very
to do
sad
with,
to hear. As Mr. Positivity of the podcast, as everyone knows, it's sad to hear an Ireland fan speaking as you just have. To be honest, I hope people haven't switched off, Nick. And hope you're all right. You got to get over it. You got to recognise they're going to disappoint us at times. Look, we all kind of brought into the dream of it, and hindsight's a wonderful thing for looking back at Stephen Kenny and how he was appointed. And the FAI stood by Stephen Kenny's insistence that he wanted to move on from the under-21 job and he was going to get that playoff. And in hindsight, I was speaking to someone today, an Ireland fan who goes home and away like myself, and he was saying, I think the mistake they made was they should have given Mick the opportunity to win that playoff and qualify for that tournament, because then there wouldn't have been as much pressure on Stephen Kenny. I know he's had lots of other factors as well impacting. The progression is annoying because we do really well or we play okay in one game, for example, Scotland, get a good performance, and then it goes flat again. And it's just absolutely peaks and troughs here with this Ireland team. I think the 2 points thing, that if that was actually true, was a massive ask, because
huge ask, yeah.
and that's kind of ridiculous. It was a false expectation of where we are, especially in the wake of that. If that should never have been released in a sense in the wake of the real abject performance against Greece away.
Yeah.
Really disappointing in that. I think that's when a lot of people started losing faith in Kenny in the in-game management. Didn't adapt that night. Really showed that Jesus, how come we're getting ripped apart down this left-hand side? Unlucky, of course, with like penalty against us, but we just didn't seem to learn, and he hasn't seemed to learn about it. So then questions come about what he's actually bringing to it, what they're working on it. It just seemed a bit amateur. If you look back at the France game, men against boys, outclassed, absolutely brilliant team. But the Holland game, we were there for the take, and we've analysed all this from the last show, of course. I felt he would get the rest of the campaign. I thought it might be a thing that the FAI would do that, but I wouldn't have blamed if they were looking elsewhere. And one of the reasons I think, they're just trying to get their house in order still. The fact of it is, commercially, monetary, we've got no money. We can't go to Lee Carsley and say, even if he was number one choice, and without a doubt, he's the one we want, you can't go to him and get him on the money, basically. Irish fans are very disillusioned. We're very reactive, obviously. Look, this is why our podcast does very well. We're the voice of the fans. We had brilliant engagement the other night, 2 hours after the game. Appreciate everyone supporting us, following the page. We've got
our most listened to episode ever.
Yeah. And we've said it ourselves, haven't we? That, when Ireland are playing awful or don't get results, that's when we get more interaction, ironically. But we are the voice of the fans. We want to hear from the fans about things. And I think that's something that the FAI has to take into account as well. But we're very reactive. When we beat Scotland 3-0, everyone's, really happy with the 3-0 performance. But we've looked at that game as well and spoke about it. That I think I've mentioned it, Matt, and you agreed, of course, with, there was lots of chances. Lots of things weren't right in that game. And we don't seem to fix those kind of things. But, just the immediacy after the poor results, we're all thinking, God, they're going to be quick. We've got to remember now, Irish football is a business. Ultimately, it's a business. We play hundreds of games at every international age group level. The women are playing now, the week coming up. The FAI have got an awful administrative task to arrange all them games. And I know, yes, the senior, the women's are the main priority, the under 21s, you could say as well. And that's why I think that they run it. I think Jonathan Hill, why he's not reactive and rent a quote is because he sees it as a business administrative role. As a CEO, the director of football, Mark Hannon, was there as well. And they had that planned. They had a whole statement written out, and then they were able to ask the question. So they had their house in order, to be fair to them, of what they were going to say, and they kept to that narrative. And I thought it was, I think Dave even actually we spoke about, didn't we? And just that, it was quite impressive in a way to see someone or two guys handling those media questions so well, in contrast to our manager, sadly. I think that does reflect a little bit on that. I mean, that shows you media training. It's just interesting, again, Irish fans, the immediacy of that, little clips going around of, people are questioning now. Look, Mark Hannon's been in there for a year now. But people are saying, well, who's this guy? Who is he? I've never heard of him. And, well, we knew who he was. But you look back and go, what credentials has he got? And I think I made the point. Well, I'll make the point later on with Vera Pauw, my view on that. But, I just thought they are organised. They know what they're doing. And they're all accountable to the board now. They have put their house in order in the background. But they get so many things wrong, the FAI. And which I think I'll come on to in the women when we talk about the Vera Pauw situation.
Have they gotten this wrong, Martin? Have they gotten the Stephen Kenny call wrong? The
extension. Here? No, I think they're buying time. Look, I had said that as well. I think they need to buy time with this. We're okay. Mathematically, we're not out of second place, but results would have to all fall our way. We're very unlikely to get even that playoff spot, which is like coming in the back door. I love the analogy someone said. It's like going to a wedding, sneaking into a wedding. Basically, if we get to that Euros, we don't deserve to be there, and it will be awful if we do. And and I think even the question that was asked about in the press briefing the other day about Euro 28, that we're going to be hopefully going to be co-hosts, and we're going to know that in I think December, I think it is, or October. And will the 5 nations be automatically qualifying? And that's something that they're going to be putting to UEFA. That at least 2 of them are going to be automatic hosts, but they're still going to go in the qualification campaign.
Yeah.
So they're trying to look at that. I mean, it was asked a question, but I mean, again, we've got to be looking at competing at our own level and qualifying on our own merits. So I don't really want to be getting to it if we're not going to do it correctly. And that's got to be the challenge for us. But I just thought I wasn't surprised they kept him on. They've got to buy time. They financially let him see out his contract. I thought it was interesting that they said even if they get to the playoff, that it's not necessarily he's going to be there. And I think they've just got to let everything settle down a bit. And we've still got 4 games to go this year. And look at that, and sadly we're selling tickets now for the duo deal which is a Greece game at home that no one has really got the appetite in less than a month to go.
And the thing as well, Martin, with that, I mean, like I honestly, and you've known me a while now, and I obviously I don't get to many away games, obviously with work and stuff like that. They're fucking midweek, it's not ideal. But look, and also I'm a lazy bastard and a tight bastard. But I go to all the home games, Martin. I go to the friendlies. Don't miss a game. Really haven't missed a game in years and years. But like for the first time in a long time. In fact, I say for the first time ever, I'm just actually not arse going. Not out of the effort of getting over to Lansdowne Road, nothing like that. But I just don't. I no longer want to get behind Stephen Kenny. I want to get behind the Ireland team, and I will get behind Stephen Kenny. But there's no real intrinsic motivation for me to do it, other than the fact that it's my country. I mean. We never expected to beat the French. We always knew that this qualification campaign was going to be tough, but it's the manner of the losses, the manner of the performances, the massive inconsistencies. My recurrent fear at the moment is that, similar to the World Cup qualifying campaign, where we went out very quickly, we lost to Luxembourg, we drew at home with Armenia. We got a couple of results at the end, didn't we? Like we drew with Portugal, we drew with Serbia, we hammered Azerbaijan, and we hammered, did I say Armenia? Sorry, Azerbaijan at home. We hammered Azerbaijan and we hammered Luxembourg away, and that was enough to, I suppose, convince the FAI that Stephen Kenny could lead us into the Euros. And my fear is that Dutch team were poor the other night. We could go away to Amsterdam. We could get a draw. Who knows? We can nick a win. It could be an unbelievable performance. The Dutch could have a serious off day. We're going to beat Gibraltar, and that Greek team aren't fantastic either. So there's a couple of results that are very possible there. But my fear is when the pressure's off, and Dave said this off air, didn't he? When the pressure's off, and when maybe you can have a go, maybe you can afford to have a go, and if we do get results, is he going to be extended into the World Cup campaign? And then in a year's time, are we talking about these massive inconsistencies? Are we talking about these poor results against weaker opposition? Are we talking about teams around our level just coasting through us? Because to give you a bit of context here, Martin, as well, and it might be a poor argument from my perspective here, because we do have France and the Netherlands in our group, but Macedonia, these are just a few teams who are in contention for automatic qualification, not just for playoffs, automatic qualification. So we have Albania, top of their group. We've North Macedonia, Armenia, Moldova, Montenegro, Finland, Kazakhstan, Romania, Israel, Luxembourg, who lost 9-0 the other night, Martin. Lost 9-0, and they're in contention for automatic qualification. And then some teams around, who I would argue are around our level, but probably because of a few individual players, are probably marginally above us. You have Hungary, Slovakia, Slovenia, Sweden, Czech Republic, Ukraine as well, all in contention for automatic qualification, all very much still in the mix. It's very dismal to see that, because people, and look, I think this could be a good standalone podcast, Martin. Have we got the players? Are the players limited? I'm looking at our squad. I'm looking at the amount of lads starting in the Premier League. It's not a huge amount, but it's more than under Mick McCarthy. And I kind of feel, no, we shouldn't be beating France. Probably shouldn't be, but we should be competing against Greece. That Netherlands team the other day, they weren't fantastic. Stephen Kenny's finding ways to lose. He's not losing on purpose, but he's finding ways to lose by not deploying the correct tactics, by not deploying the correct approach, by making unusual team selections where he's putting round pegs into square holes. I probably sound flat, Martin. I probably sound flat, but I'm just trying to piece it all together.
No, I think that's where the doubt comes in. Though, it's the tactical changes, the lateness doing that and adjusting. and then the questionable personnel that he's picking as well. Look, it comes down to we have to go back and reflect on the toughness of this group. Now I know Holland are not no great shakes, but France were always going to win this group, and it was between us, Greece, and Holland, and for that second place really. But now we might not even get. Well, we'll probably get scrape fourth, I suppose. But this is why I think it is panic stations at the moment, just because I think we've had some dismal results. I think people are not forgiving the Greek tragedy. There you go. Do you like that? They're not forgiving that. And
no Dutch courage the other day, Martin.
No, exactly. I'm trying to think of more. But we are. We're now got the Greeks coming up, and we're between a rock and a hard place. We've got Gibraltar coming up. There you go. Got the the Gibraltar bit in there. Yeah. But no, in all seriousness, like Greece was the real letdown. If we'd got a result there and we'd even got a draw, we could have gone right now. We've got them at home. We're definitely going to get third. If we beat them, get a good result against Holland. It's just the poor results, and that is what's letting them down. And I think
it's the lack of progression as well, Martin. Yeah. It's the lack of progression.
Now, I think if you look at it though, like Stephen Kenny, in a way, he's been given a bit of a reprieve here. Well, he has been given a reprieve, right? We could go out. I don't know if this will happen, but in October, Evan Ferguson fit. All the feel good factor about that. He might start firing a few goals. Mikey Johnson, I don't know if he's back or not, but you might have a few players back who are missing, right?
Yeah.
Going to play Greece on a Friday night in Dublin. The build up to that, we'll forget the recent results. Most fans will have their season ticket and think, you know what, I'll go and watch them. You'll feel the same, Nick. This is how you have to go over it as an Ireland fan.
No, I think I will. I will.
So I will be. To watch it.
I will be there.
We might get
I will be there. I just don't feel like it.
No, at the moment you don't, because it's raw. But you're going to go then. We might get a result, and if we got 3 points there, and then we're going to go on to Gibraltar, and that's a 6-point window, and that looks a lot better on the books. Everything there, and we're going to Holland. A month later to see, can we do something special there? You just don't know. But I know that's incredibly optimistic. But that's Stephen Kenny. This is his cup final. He's got to get that result now against Greece. Now, historically, we haven't done very well in our first game. We've been very flat normally when we collect into camp, and we don't seem to do very well at all. But that's going to be his challenge now. That's his reprieve. I think that's the real test for me now coming up. And I think if they have a very flat performance there, you'll see the players aren't behind him, and they're not playing for him anymore, and it's over basically. If
we get 4 results, Martin, is Stephen Kenny going to have his contract extended, or is this, as so many people are saying this week, is this a case that the FAI don't have a pot to piss in? They possibly approached Lee Carsley, had no joy there, and they've no one to replace him, because there's an argument for an interim boss. There was talk of, now nothing concrete. Jesus, this is all speculation and suggestions from the media. This isn't anything that was kind of thrown around or anything that was leaked, but there was talk and suggestions that someone like John O'Shea could possibly take over for the rest of the campaign until a manager is put in place. But I mean, if you think about it, Martin, Giovanni Trapattoni, one of the greatest managers of all time, got us to a European Championships, was on the cusp of getting us to a World Cup. He was sacked very late in the qualification campaign, and Noel King was put in interim basis until Martin O'Neill was appointed. Steve Staunton, probably worse than Stephen Kenny, sacked very, very late in a qualification campaign. We were well out of the running at that stage, and was replaced by Don Givens. And subsequently, it took months to replace Staunton with Giovanni Trapattoni. So Stephen Kenny, who has gone out of 2 qualification campaigns virtually after the second game, obviously results in the group kind of ruling us out of contention as well. He is surviving. Could they not have gone with John O'Shea as an interim option? Was there a possibility Lee Carsley could have come in and maybe he wasn't interested, maybe he wasn't available? Like, what is the logic? What is the logic?
I think if the FAI haven't made inquiries of Lee Carsley even for future, like even to think if 3 or 4 years down the line, that do you one day want the Ireland job? I suspect he probably wants the England job. To be honest, he's involved in that whole setup. Um, and again, I go back to, I think we mentioned in the podcast before, he didn't feel part of the World Cup in a sense. 2002,
Yeah.
you know, he doesn't
Feels he
look
never
back.
played the best he could have for his
Yeah,
country.
and you know, then that's another question for another day in a way. But so how, not questioning how Irish he feels, but you know, does he feel any loyalty and think I'm going to come back and be the Ireland manager one day? I think you know that probably is an aspiration of Damien Duff, for example, probably more than Lee Carsley in his career
Yeah.
as a coach. Um, John O'Shea going in there, it would have been a big risk, all right, you know, because it's kind of showing this hasn't worked, and it would show them up to be a bit clueless in a way that you know, that we haven't got an idea what way to go forward with this. So I can understand why they kept Kenny in there, and they're trusting that he may well turn this around. But I think what, like I said, it's one as a business. I think it's also saved him the fact that they've got no women's manager. That is a valid thing. Don't want two teams out,
Yeah.
and we're on a big recruitment drive for managers. Because looking at it, you have to think players and managers, prospective managers looking at it, are thinking, this association, do I really want to work with them when they've sacked their women's manager or let her contract go, and look how that ended. There's a lot of uncertainty. You know, even if we've got star players coming through that you might want to manage, or a very good youth system coming through, you've got to be thinking, who are my bosses ultimately, and do they know what they're doing, and do I like the pathway they're going down now? In the
Yeah.
briefing as well, you heard a lot about 10-year plans from Mark Canham and what way they're looking forward, and you know, even the way they do these reviews and they're inside camps and they're speaking to the players and things.
Yeah.
That's just a
But
very
but
natural
but
thing they
but
do.
what got me with that, Martin, is I'm
Mm.
all for 10-year plans, but with any country and with any association, you have your 10-year plan, but you're also concurrently working on the present,
Yeah,
because football's a results game. At international level, your coefficient can drop. Now, look, the coefficients are all very close together now, aren't they? You know, the standards are quite equal. Like your pot two can be very equal. It can be very
yeah,
equal to your pot four sometimes, but you know, you have to stop rots in football, and long-term plans have to be concurrent with results in the present. If you look at the we spoke about the Dutch influence within the FAI over the last 15 years, Wim Kuvermans and Root Doctor, and Canham have essentially replaced Doctor. And
mm.
the issue there was there was a lot of planning going on well, sorry, not even an issue, but there was a lot of planning going on in the background in regards to developing young players. A lot of those players are in the senior team right now.
Mm.
And at the same time, I wouldn't say this was necessarily the FAI. I wouldn't say that this is necessarily purposely done. It was more the fact of the managers we had in charge. But you had Giovanni Trapattoni and Martin O'Neill playing a horrible brand of football, but a very functional style of football that got us to a couple of major tournaments, consecutive European Championships. So that's an example of planning for the future, but also making the use of the present resources with the senior team. And, you know, Stephen Kenny basically dismissed the World Cup campaign in a very, very doable group, I feel. You
Mm.
know, Serbia showed in the World Cup that they weren't a fantastic side at all. Portugal as well. I mean, I've obviously followed the Portuguese national team very, very, very closely, and you know, they again not really in their best ever shape. And I can seriously back that up. You know, so you have to get the present right as well, because if the present starts slipping, it makes the future much more challenging, because you could be in pot five and all of a sudden this golden generation, or this generation you've been developing for 10 years, has to build the national team back up to a higher pot. Like there's so many layers to it that I just don't understand. But look, as you mentioned, Martin, I suppose it's probably the natural time to move the discussion on to Vera Pauw, because you know the Stephen Kenny stuff has been well digested. You know, we are going to be chatting about it again on Sunday in the live. But in terms of Vera Pauw, we're seeing a contrast in view here, where Stephen Kenny has massively underachieved. In some respects, he's succeeded in others, but the bottom line is he hasn't gotten us to a major tournament in 3 attempts. You know, European
Mm.
Championship playoff, World Cup, and a second European Championship campaign. Where Vera Pauw, who's gotten our women's national team to their first ever World Cup, has really changed the face of women's football in Ireland, which was explained by Jonathan Hill. She lost her job, and the justification for that was explained in the press briefing. Look, Martin, you're a very keen follower of the women's national team. We obviously spoke to Vera Pauw at Christmas time. I suppose spirits were very, very different. We spoke to her actually only a couple of days after the article from the Athletic came out. And at the time, it seemed that the FAI were very much behind her. It seemed that she was receiving a lot of support, both from the FAI and from the public. But a lot of things transpired in that press briefing, Martin, that suggested, I suppose, that Pauw just wasn't the fit for the players or the association anymore.
Yeah, and that's it. And really, I think was careful what you wish for is the thing. I think for the FAI have to be very careful now, because Vera Pauw came in and really shook up Irish football at the women's level. She brought us onto that elite level. She definitely brought us up levels, brought in a level of professionalism into it. Her own, very like Trapattoni in a way. This is my way, and this is or Jack even in a sense with the men's. You're going to do it my way, and it's proven and tried and tested, and she has incredible success over the years doing that. What's happened then is that she's motivated that team, who are a very young team. If you think like they missed out in previous tournament qualifications in heartbreaking fashion, and then they were focused on qualifying for this World Cup, and they ultimately achieved that. But some of those girls, especially, were very young then and coming through. They've qualified, they've had that taste of it. They've also gone on professionally within their own respective club careers, where they're getting training, strength and conditioning training, recovery sessions, a totally different way, more modern football, which is very much away from probably what Vera's view is. Now, Vera is highly respected. She's going to be I think she's actually writing a book on her view of football. You could kind of, not being disrespectful to her, but she's very old school. She's very abrupt, very Dutch, kind of very like Van Gaal, isn't it? In a sense, he had his ideas at Man United of how you do it. I mean, quite tedious to watch at times, but it gets results. Very like Trapattoni, gets results. I think what's happened here is functional, and you play to your strengths. And I think she's really done well there with that squad getting to the World Cup. I think the Athletic article obviously didn't help, and it reared its head as well. But I think where she's kind of shot herself in the foot was the whole build up to the World Cup was very flat. Sadly, it wasn't exciting as it should have been, because it was overshadowing it. And I think the FAI were a bit pissed off, to be honest, where he mentions it, Jonathan Hill, that he didn't tell Vera. He actually says, you don't tell Vera what to do, but he did advise, I don't think you should refer to this in the press conference after the France game. And she did. She went there. And that's what was very disappointing. Katie McCabe kind of made the comment, didn't she? It obviously pissed her off when she said, thanks for talking to us about the World Cup. Really looking forward to it, lads.
You'd wonder if Katie McCabe was briefed as well, and maybe that's where that comment came from.
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, I just think, it was asked as well, like Gareth Maher, friend of the pod.
Friend of the podcast.
He had said that, he was giving them advice to the players, you shouldn't comment on Vera's contract and things like that, because there was all talk and it was all going to happen. And then something's obviously gone awry. And it's interesting, Mark Handham's view on it, saying, that he was observing things as he does in camps. And Jonathan Hill was at pains to kind of say, I'm around the team, I'm at tournaments, I'm at things. It's natural for me to be in the team hotel. And it is, he is at the men's as well, let's be fair. But, that must be quite overshadowing of everything for Vera Pauw and how she is set in her way of working. And I think just must have felt very undermined. And ultimately, they don't want the coach that is going to be hard on players or that kind of stuck in her ways. And they said basically Vera's not for turning. And they're left now in a situation where it's kind of perceived as player power to some extent. I think it was telling as well that Vera mentioned, her assistant manager was interviewed, and it was must have been an awful World Cup for them, really, and fair play for them, the girls getting performances out of themselves and doing so well. I mean, we've seen the fallout from this. Stephen Kenny, Jonathan Hill talking about the build up now. 30,000 tickets are sold for the game coming up in the Aviva Stadium. That should have been a glorious homecoming. I know some of the girls are out of the game now and things like that, but it saddens me that Vera only had O'Connell Street and the homecoming there for her to kind of be remembered fondly by us. But she is,
she was warmly welcome. She was warmly welcome then, yeah. And it's a weird one, Martin. It's always this recurring kind of theme that is player power a little bit too much. The fact that Vera has gotten us to a stage where we never would have dreamed of. I mean, was it 2017?
Yeah,
I mean, the girls in that famous press conference documenting the really poor conditions that they were under. I mean, during the World Cup, Martin, I think you'd agree that a lot of people became experts. A lot of people who never watched the women's national team became
yeah,
experts, and they probably didn't watch the qualification campaign. Vera was always very rigid. Even the European Championship campaign prior to the World Cup, very rigid.
mm,
Not very easy on the eye. But one thing that was the case was we do have a few world class players. You know, Denise O'Sullivan's an excellent player, of course, Katie McCabe as well, and Sinead Farrelly, who came in very late to the squad. You know, only earlier this year. You know, excellent player. But I suppose the flair from those players, coupled with the organisation that Pauw had kind of influenced, that's what got us to the World Cup. That's what got us competing. We had no right to be competing against the likes of Australia, Canada in that group, and considering the conditions that these players have come into. A talented side, but you know, Noel King, he did 10 years with a very talented side as well and got absolutely nowhere.
yeah,
You know, Colin Bell, one of the top rated coaches in world women's football, I suppose. You know, Champions League winner. You know, he obviously went off to Huddersfield, didn't he, quite quickly? But I mean, he didn't have as much success either as Pauw. Sue Ronan, one of the most experienced coaches in Irish football as well. You know, obviously unfortunate circumstances with her as well. She struggled too. But when Pauw came in, yes, it wasn't easy on the eye, but she was utilizing players in such a way that it was effective. And a lot of the experts, I think a lot of people within the media, uh, suddenly thought, "Oh Jesus, yeah, we qualified and it was great." And Amber Barrett scored, and why isn't Amber Barrett playing? Amber Barrett wasn't playing because she hadn't scored a goal all season for her club. You
yeah,
know, she hadn't started that many games in the qualification campaign. The style of football that we played in the World Cup, I would actually argue that it was marginally more attractive than the style we saw in the qualification campaign. So I think there was a lot of media influence as well. I'm not saying that the media ousted Vera Pauw, but I think the FAI certainly listened to it. They certainly observed it. And when the media start talking, a lot of people start going with the media view, a little bit like how you might go with the views of your favorite pundit, a little bit like how you might go with the views of your favorite journalist. People started turning, and then the players, maybe they were ignoring that stuff. You'd imagine that they were, but the player power coupled with I suppose, the wider context of how Vera Pauw was regarded was probably a massive influence in her going. And it's a shame, Martin, because you know we could look back in a few years' time and think, Jesus Christ, she's the only manager to actually get us to a major finals. Hopefully, that's not the case, but
mhm.
you know it could very well be. And I
Yeah.
mean,
So I mean,
look. Yeah, and
it's
just
a,
another thing, Martin. I mean, we're speaking in a week where Stephen Kenny and this has been an argument for the last several weeks, Martin Hassan. But we're speaking in a week where Stephen Kenny, who's you know really struggled and has a really poor record and isn't getting, like, he is not getting the best out of the players. He's not getting the best out of our players. He's not maximizing our players. He's not learning from his mistakes. He's lost his job, and Vera, who's overachieved in my opinion anyway, she's lost it. So very contrasting fortunes in a week.
yeah, without doubt. I mean, one of the other factors there is the profile of players, and like you said, everyone became an expert on the women's game and had more interest in it, which is brilliant to see. I'm by far an expert on it, but everyone should be getting behind them. I said I wanted the girls to be household names, and mostly they are now. I was looking through the squad today, and I was thinking, oh wow, well, I noticed players who were missing, and I was thinking, well, that's a bit strange, and you're more interested in it. I think what as well though, one of the problems you have then is the media coverage of it was, people figuring out, who Katie McCabe is and seeing her do so fantastically well for Arsenal and seeing these incredible goals and voted as you know, for the Ballon d'Or nominee and,
Yeah,
goal of the tournament and things like that. And you're thinking, wow, what an amazing player. But where's she playing? Well, she plays a bit further forward for Arsenal, but we play her as left wing back or left back. And it's like, okay, well, why do we do that? And that was just Vera's view. And I think that kind of undermined it as well. And then the questioning of tactics during the game as a high profile player and that kind of thing just didn't kind of sit well. And I think it's a very attractive job though. This team can really progress, and I know Eileen Gleeson's come in there. It's interesting. I think brilliant as well to see
very good
Emma Byrne
appointment.
and Colin Healy coming in there
Yeah,
as
excellent. Three
coaches.
excellent appointments there. Three excellent
Yeah,
appointments.
and it will be an exciting event. I think seeing the girls in Dublin, the Aviva Stadium or Lansdowne, of course. But and I'd encourage people to go to see them in the flesh and reward them with fantastic fanfare for you know doing so well at the World Cup, and the women's game's building as we know. And I think it's an attractive job though going forward. And I think again the FAI have got to get that one right, because underage as well, we've got some brilliant talent coming through and has to be nurtured. And we've, as I said, we're careful what you wish for, because we want to see us playing a progressive game and attacking game. And Vera was probably not that. I mean, anyone we spoke to Sue Ronan before the World Cup or during the World Cup, and she said she would like to see us go out and be a bit more attacking now. And I think that's the vibe.
I think Sue thought Vera would go a bit more attacking, that she would let the shackles off. But I mean, at the same time, that Australian team, I honestly think they would have absolutely battered us if we open up the shackles a bit. The Canadian team as well, they were all over us for the second half of the game. I don't think there should have been any issue with how Vera set up in that World Cup. And that Nigeria side as well, very, very strong. We managed to draw against them. We'd no right to get a point in that group. I don't think we were right to be ambitious. We were right to be ambitious, absolutely. But we played three of the best teams in women's football, and to come out with a point, to come out with losses by a goal was phenomenal. And I think it's a testament to Vera Pauw. But I suppose, Martin, just to kind of finish up on that, do you think, and I know it's a very, very broad question, but do you think Vera Pauw will be hard done by based on what the FAI said the other day?
I think she was hard done by. I think it's she's being questioned basically by people that I think she perceives are not as experienced as her and don't know the game and the way she coaches. And we all have opinions on that. And Mark Hannam's got his own view of and experiences of how you strengthen, condition, and prepare players, whereas Vera has an older kind of view, I suppose, and it's not aligned to what the FAI are doing. And the FAI have been strong enough in their belief that that's the way they're going to go forward.
And sorry to cut in, Martin, but ironically with that as well, we when we did speak, and it's not just dropping the interview in here, do check it out. It's from around Christmas time. But when we did speak to Vera Pauw, we brought up the question of, I suppose, the influence of other Dutch coaches, and we spoke about Gus Hiddink, and we spoke about how he conditioned the South Korean team in 2002, I suppose, to compete in that World Cup. And what Gus Hiddink did was he arranged friendlies with some of the top teams in the world. And because obviously South Korea weren't playing in qualification games, and rather than playing, your Omans and your Saudi Arabias, he organized friendlies against your Germanys, your Brazils, your top teams. And they lost a lot of games, but they also improved in a lot of games. And as a result, the standard of individual players, Park Ji-sung is one example, and the team as a unit improved. And as a result, now maybe with a bit of help from FIFA corruption, alleged FIFA corruption, they got to a World Cup quarterfinal. When we put that to Vera, she kind of put it so far that she said, "You're really only, what she was saying was, if you play teams and friendlies that are way below your profile, you're conditioning yourself to play that caliber of team." And I think Stephen Kenny and the FAI can learn a lot from that, because who do we arrange friendlies with? Latvia, Lithuania, Malta, Andorra, and it's possibly reflective of where the team are at the moment, because they're not. I mean, we've Premier League players, we've Championship players, but when that's your opposition, when you're trying to build and when you're trying to condition, that's the standard that you're going to go to. And as I said, Vera's view on that side of conditioning, not necessarily the training ground side of it, but the match day, actual real game scenario side of it, it seems fairly sound. And you'll think that whoever the FAI bring in, like Eileen Gleeson, for example, she's not going to get the job full time, but she is an unbelievable coach, probably one of the best women's coaches up there with the likes of Sue Ronan. But you'd imagine that the next person that comes in, unless they have something unbelievably revolutionary, the simplistic but very effective conditioning styles of Pauw could be sorely missed, and regrettably missed as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. There's been obviously a bit of speculation that he could get it, but I thought it's interesting Colin Healy coming in there. I wonder, would he consider the role at all?
Yeah.
Emma Byrne, is it like a little bit of a test thing to see, does this suit me without any real pressure? It could be there. Emma Byrne coming in, I think, is a key one. I mean, you could even see Karen Duggan coming in. It's interesting. It's so in its early days. I don't mean that derogatory, but it's just like we've had a real massive boost and explosion now. The girls' game should explode in Ireland, and everyone should be really following it. And more interest, participation, of course. And some of them old legends, Emma Byrne. We need them involved. They they've got the credentials, got the experience of it. So I think that could be something that we can take it onwards now and have new ideas and trust in the fact that a lot of these women are doing the coaching badges within the FAI structure. So that's there as a pathway for them. And perhaps that is what they're going to do: go in house with it and bring experience in that way. And I think just the levels of the players you got to remember. I mean, look, we talk about the men's team coming from Championship, a few in the Premiership, exactly. Then you've got the women's. The scale of it's unbelievable. Kate
Yeah.
McKay playing Champions League football. I mean, Abby Larkin, she's just gone now to Glasgow City today, in a move from Shamrock Rovers. So that's her going up a level, which we knew was going to happen. But they need to get up to that higher level to play on that level playing field, ironically, because they've got Kate McCabe is looking for people making runs, and it's not happening. Whereas that happens at Arsenal because they're used to that. So I thought it was fantastic what you said there. That reminded us that Vera Pauw made those points of you'll condition yourself to play at that level, so you have to aspire to be better.
Yeah, for sure. And as I said, there's some revolutionary stuff in terms of strength and conditioning, and the advances of sports science are fantastic. And it could be an old school approach, but it's a simplistic and effective one. And if you look at the opposition that we arranged friendlies with, Australia being an example, when we beat them 3-2 in Tala, we did condition to qualify and compete at that World Cup. Finally, Martin, I suppose the issue of sponsorship or lack of was also discussed in the press briefing. Still no sponsor for the senior men's national team. Of course, Sky, the sponsors of the women's national team, but no kind of move on the commercial side of things. Jonathan Hill citing Brexit as one of the reasons why there is still no primary sponsor for the men's national team. But you had a couple of thoughts on it. It's something that you've brought up now and again, I suppose, on episodes. But where do you think we are with the sponsorship? And is there any sponsorship on the horizon based on Jonathan Hill's comments?
There's not really. I think one of the arguments I think commercially is that we're aiming too high. That they're thinking the free deal ended and we're looking for too much money. But you need investment in football to be successful at every level. And I know they talked about the debt, and we are an association in debt, but we've cleared I think 20 million off that. Don't know where that's going to come from. They've asked is it from central government? Not really answers on that. I think that's one of the reasons, though, as well. Perhaps not making kind of a big change yet. Like I think they're in favour of letting contracts run out, so that we're not serving, compensation money and things like that, because they just can't afford to do so. It's not too long ago. You have to remember, and I'm not knocking him and bringing it up for that reason, but Robbie Keane was taking money out of the association basically on a contract that he was given in the latter part of the Delaney era. It does bug me, the sponsor thing. It does from the perspective that we should have one. And especially when I look at the investment that goes into other sports and the money going into GAA and sponsorship as well of local teams and things like that, and also the rugby. I'd love a big high profile brand associated with Ireland and Ireland's history to kind of get behind the team and think actually they want to be associated.
I wonder which
in the bad times.
I wonder which brand of stout that is, Martin, that you're
I
referring
know,
to.
yeah. It'd be brilliant, wouldn't it? Just to have the Shamrock on a. I mean, I'd love it. It'd be brilliant. But but you could. That is the natural one for me, because.
Well, look how many multinational companies are in Ireland. I mean,
yeah, it's just
incredible.
incredible.
And look at Google, Apple down
yeah.
in Cork. Like they're and look again, an episode for a different day. But you wonder why there hasn't been more investment from multinational companies in League of Ireland clubs. But it's a strange one, and it's dragged on for so long. And again, like you'd imagine, it's the fact that sponsors don't want to get into bed with the FAI. Obviously, still
they're uncertain.
kind of
they're uncertain about the
they're
FAI.
uncertain. Yeah.
And the Castore deal as well, that was uncertain for fans as well, the quality and things. And we saw that the other night with poor Sinclair Armstrong's shirt being ripped off him.
Yeah.
But I think we have got sponsors. I just think it's the big one you want, and it's not necessarily to have the shirt adorned with it. And that probably is the thing that again, it's an error that we ever let that happen. That was an expectation now, sponsors coming in, because you can't, we have the free all over everything, and
Yeah.
I just hope we do get something down the line, because it will help, and you can't
Is
go with a
Stephen
big
is
and bold
Stephen
to these
Kenny
companies.
harming it? Do you think? I mean, I know we've discussed this on the show before, but is Stephen Kenny harming the
Possibly.
the attraction of potential sponsorship?
Yeah, I think possibly, because you have to remember, I think a fantastic article actually by Ian Mallon, who was of the FAI in the Examiner. I found it quite interesting, because he was saying that, an idea for the FAI was, as I said the other day, not that I want to see it happen necessarily from a footballing perspective, but the idea that Roy Keane come in as an interim manager, or for a while, was because he will be box office and he will attract sponsors. And, one of the remits of the manager as well commercially is they go to events and corporate things. I mean, when Martin O'Neill and Roy Keane were involved with the FAI, they'd done a corporate thing, a breakfast thing in London. And we were lucky enough in the supporters club to be invited along to it. Brilliant. Roy Keane was fantastic as a speaker that day, and brilliantly engaging with the fans and asking us, "Oh, what's that like?" They were off to a game somewhere, and we'd been there before, and he was saying, "Oh, what's that like as a spot and stuff?" Martin O'Neill, brilliant company, but I don't think they ever followed up on that commercially. They're not attuned yet. If they're a
No.
bit out of touch, I feel. And we will talk about this another day, because there is this corporate package at the Aviva, and there's this Club Ireland thing, and I'm lucky enough, I've been at Club Wembley things in England, and you can kind of see packages. I've been at events at Croke Park, and I think I'd like to kind of get a bit of analysis of it to compare what money we're looking for and actually what people are getting for this. And I think,
But who? What fan is like?
no, what fans can do it? Yeah, like who's
yeah,
going to want to
but
go and see it? Yeah,
yeah. I mean, apart from kind of, I suppose corporate sponsorship and companies looking to entertain clients, what fans are going to want to invest in that? Who's going to want
yeah.
to put their money into that?
Mm.
And,
That,
and is Stephen Kenny going to entice them to do so?
no, that's at the moment probably not, and the performances aren't there. But you're hoping it's just a kind of downward spiral, isn't it? Because if you don't attract sponsors, you want them in the when it comes around, then we qualify whatever way we get there. Then the sponsors come in, don't they, and things. And there's a lot of money in football, as we know, and I don't know. It's just
There's a lot of money in Ireland as well. A lot of money in Ireland as well, Martin.
Yeah.
A huge amount. And I mean, Dennis O'Brien is one example of someone who managed to bankroll the FAI and bankroll appointments. But I mean, I suppose John Delaney was a big factor in that. He's not there anymore. But it's you almost feel that it's going to take some kind of private investment. Look at the Moroccan national team. Now that was some kind of billionaire prince, wasn't it, that invested in their team? He enticed a lot of kind of French and Dutch and Belgian players to play for them. They've after finishing, was it third or fourth in the World Cup? Was it third?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, like, look at that now. I'm not saying that we can necessarily compete with that or be the same level, but sometimes the FAI have to box clever. Sometimes they have to be proactive, and you would just wonder, is maybe discontinuing their relationship with Stephen Kenny one of those proactive approaches? It's very hard to tell, and I think even Martin, if Stephen Kenny had gone, and even if there was an interim boss, whether that be maybe not Roy Keane, but maybe that be John O'Shea or whoever, you would generate a bit of a buzz, because you feel that there's a new era coming. You feel that maybe this golden generation who have been brought through to his credit by Stephen Kenny will finally be taken under the wing of a better manager. You might generate a bit of interest. You might generate a bit of reinvigoration. And even if we're out of the group, at least it's not the status quo that's going to be that you're going to encounter, I suppose, going into Lansdowne Road in October, November. But it's an unusual place to be.
They are, though. The FAI are basically banking now on future revenue from a Nations League draw, that we're going to get a real high profile team like England, and they're also it's going to add incredibly to the pressure on Evan Ferguson to deliver. He was mentioned in the briefing as well, that we've now got a 100 million plus player and stuff. I mean, that's nothing really to do with the FAI's development of them, I'd argue, and they're just lucky with it. And we want our young players, of course, to do well and have the profile and things, and that's what we want to see. And where's that come from? I mean, it's a whole argument for another day, but I think it's just very important that the whole buzz now going into the Greece game will be on the back of come and see Evan Ferguson, basically.
Yeah.
As it was with Norway, in a sense, when we were playing them, it was all, well, come see Norway because Haaland's going to play, and he didn't even play. So it's just that. It's very short minded
It
at the
is.
moment, short-sighted. Sorry, and it's immediate. We want to, they've got to sell those tickets now, and
Absolutely, and
yeah,
similar to Portugal last year, Martin. I mean, would Lansdowne Road had packed out if Cristiano Ronaldo wasn't coming to town? When Ireland were on a low ebb where they were effectively out of the European Championships, or sorry, out of the World Cup qualification, like would we have seen a packed Lansdowne Road? And if we didn't see a packed Lansdowne Road, would Stephen Kenny have survived the World Cup qualification? So it's a lot of factors that come into it. So look, just conscious of the time, we are going to leave it there. We will be back tomorrow on the live stream where we will be discussing, I suppose, the FAI press briefing briefly, as well as how all of the lads got on over the weekend. I can see already that Aaron Connolly has scored a very late equaliser for Hull City. So there's one for Big already, Martin. So we will leave it there. I would apologise for the flatness of my voice, but I won't lie, Martin. It's been a hard week as an Ireland fan. It's been a uninspiring one, and as you said, hopefully the numbness that I'm feeling now does kind of pave over. But again, thanks for your contributions, Martin. Hopefully we will be a little bit more upbeat tomorrow night when we are back for Green Machine Live. So be sure to subscribe wherever you're listening to the podcast right now. Some really, really good interaction, a lot of new followers, a lot of new subscribers over the international window, and we welcome and thank all of you. So until tomorrow night, all the best and take care.
All right.